Hi, Eric. Welcome to the show.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Now, you are a fellow Canadian. Actually, you're American, but you live in Canada.
Yes.
I
Yes,
stand
been here.
corrected.
Yeah, been here for about 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's in Calgary, the province of Alberta. What's it like for you to live in Canada, being an American? What's that like?
I really enjoy the amenities, the landscapes, because where I'm originally from in Tennessee, they call them mountains, but they're just really big hills. So being next to the Rocky Mountains is really nice. It's really fun to be next to that. So yeah, I love the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I've always thought about Calgary, and I did live there for the summer of 1968. My father built a slaughterhouse there. It was the first computerized slaughterhouse in Canada, and he built. He was an architect. And so we spent the summer and went to Calgary Stampede, and we wore cowboy hats and stuff. And then we got in the car, we started driving west, and all of a sudden you see the Rocky Mountains in front of you. Quite a majestic sight.
So amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going toward Banff and Lake Louise. Yeah.
Yeah. And even at age 11, which I was at the time, I thought, oh, I see why Calgary exists. When people were going west, some people said, yeah, you keep going if you want. We're staying here, you know.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. Because all of a sudden the mountains just appear. They're just there. Really
Mhm.
magnificent. Well, enough of that. This is more about you. Before we get to your book, and you've written one book, and I understand you're working on a second one. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? We know you come from Tennessee and you live in Calgary. What else can we learn about you?
Yeah, I was born in Arkansas. Then I was moving from Arkansas when I was around 5 years old to Tennessee. Been there, born and bred. Well, not born, but bred in Tennessee for sure since 5 or so years on. And my wife is from Calgary, so I surrendered up here back in August of 2014. So it has been 10 years as of this year. I've worked in Mississippi professionally as a counselor in Corinth, Mississippi. Went to a university in Tennessee for my bachelor's and master's. So I've done bachelor's in psych and a master's in counseling. I do a lot of hiking. I do a lot of biking on the trails here. I did some canoeing for the first time on Monday of this last week, which was fun with my brother-in-law. Which, yes, in the mountains,
Hmm.
right outside Canmore.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I like to be outside. I love to be out in nature. It's just a place that I like to be.
Well, you're in the right place
And
for it. That's for sure.
yeah, yeah. And I got a martial arts background as well.
Yeah, because I see the book. It's called The Martial Art of Recovery. Well, let's get
Hmm.
right to it. You want to talk about that?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like a manifesto of sorts. What I do is, well, I'll backtrack to the genesis of the book. So I was just wondering, how can I bring addiction terminology, addiction concepts like recovery from addiction and mental health in a way that maybe is metaphorical, that makes sense, that's dumbed down, that's a little bit more simple. And so started to look at martial arts, which I have a background in, and I started to translate these martial arts techniques that I learned from American Kenpo to addiction and mental health treatment. And so there's over 60 techniques in the book. There's over 90 different concepts that I translate from martial arts over to primarily addiction recovery, but they can also, some of them be used for mental health treatment as well. And so I've just been looking at these different manuals. I was able to have permission to look at from a gentleman in Kentucky. I appreciate Eric Lampkin. Shout out to him and his brother who developed these manuals for the American Kenpo martial art. And I was able to take that material and start to transcribe it.
Okay.
And yeah, that's pretty much a short, quick elevator pitch, of the book in a
Yeah.
nutshell.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. How long is
Yeah.
the book?
In print, it's a little over 400 pages, like 436 or so pages,
Okay.
all in notes and everything put together.
Illustrations as well, because it's martial arts.
There's one illustration at the end. I don't have any other ones.
Okay. All right. Okay. Out of curiosity, which martial art are you part of?
So I did a Wadō-ryū karate. That's when I was around 10 to 12. And then what I know primarily is the American Kenpo martial art, which is more about hitting pressure points. It's a little bit of I guess you could call it a dirty art, but it's good for, well, self-defense.
Self-defense. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. So it's a lot of punches, kicks, blocks.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah.
Ever had to use it?
Thankfully not.
No.
Thankfully not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Well, martial arts makes me think of the need for discipline. And one of the questions I like to ask people, not on this show, but just people in my life. And recently, earlier this year, I was talking to a young person and I thought I'd try it again. I go, hey, if I say the word discipline, what's the first thing that pops into your head? And so often people say, punishment. Well, yes,
Mm,
that is one of the definitions of discipline, but you as a martial artist knows that discipline is what's required to be a martial artist.
yes. Yes,
And
that goes
so
into, yeah.
and so this discipline is part of a recovery program too, I take it.
Yes.
If you realize you're doing too much of something and you need to stop this addictive personality, you have to apply discipline. How does your book help with that?
In the first chapter, I talk about what's called the opponent, which I characterize metaphorically. That's a personified version of addiction. And so in that chapter, I talk about discipline, I talk about self-control, self-respect, respect for others, balance in its many forms. Balance is a big part of martial arts, as it is in life. And so when it comes to discipline, self-control is a huge piece. And a big portion of the book is learning different techniques and concepts to help with that self-control so I can respond rather than just simply react.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well said. You are a counselor and that's your trade and you have patients that you deal with?
I do. Yeah, yeah. I got like 5 different positions. One of those is the private practice. Yeah,
Okay. All right. Okay.
yeah.
Um, I've spoken to a few people like yourself who have a practice and then written a book. And I learned early on by asking the question, so I already know the answer. You don't use this book in your practice because that would be a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I'll bring up different concepts and pieces, and I will like mention I wrote a book and I have it in the office, but I'm not going to be like preaching and saying
Mm,
this is the dogmatic only way that someone could work on addiction or mental health concerns. I use a lot of different treatment modalities, and it's there for people that want to look at that as a possibility. But yes, I don't sequester it during the sessions a
sure.
lot. Yeah.
Understandably. But it was
Yeah.
your passion that made you write this book, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot of experiences. It's a lot of growth when I was doing the practice in martial arts because I was at a tender age, 10 to 12, 16 to 18. Um, did some tournaments when I was early. I didn't do any tournaments when I was doing the American Kenpo. It was a lot more just at the dojo learning the martial art. But yeah, so just a lot of different experiences when it comes to learning the balance between like aggressiveness and passivity. So learning that place of assertiveness for me with my body, with my mind, feelings. So yeah, lots of learning there with those experiences because it wasn't always easy for me. I was always on the passive side when it came to like sparring, and so learning how to become a little more assertive
Okay.
with doing the sparring part was something.
Yeah. So recovery from addictions. Well, the first thing that pops into my head would be alcoholism, drug addiction. What other kind of addictions do you deal with?
Gambling, addiction involving toxic relationships, pornography, excessive pornography,
Mm-hmm.
um, and yes, alcohol and cocaine for sure. I'm seeing a lot of people when it comes to cannabis use. And cannabis is legal
Right.
where I'm at. Well, it's illegal in
Yeah,
Canada, so
exactly. Yeah. I was going to
yeah.
ask you about that. Has there been an increase in people who are suffering from cannabis addictions from
It's
what?
a really yeah, John. It's a really interesting question. I would say that I have been working with people more where they see it as an issue. Um, I'm working with one person in particular where it started out to be maybe a tool for this person, but then it became to pervade their life in ways they didn't want it to.
Mm-hmm.
So so yeah, those are the main substances, and there are those process behaviors. I don't work a lot with people that do over shopping, but over shopping can be one. We see how easy it is to get, maybe like Prime or, getting deliveries really
Hmm.
quickly, and there is that as well. So
Right.
there's
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. What about people who are down on themselves and just have a low self-esteem? That's not really an addiction unless it's very broad to say you're addicted to bad thoughts. You
Mm.
come across a lot of that?
Yeah, I do work with people where they put themselves down a lot of self-hate, a little
Yeah.
self-loathing, and those are interchangeable really. And so they don't have a lot of self-compassion or self-love for myself. And
Hmm.
one of my parts in the book is what I call the five swords, metaphorically speaking. It is a martial arts technique, but one of the five swords in the book is self-love, vitality. And so I talk about self-love and different ways to cultivate that. Um, so there is that part to consider for sure. People would beat themselves up. They have that inner roommate that they're paying rent to that isn't really actually paying any rent to be there. It's just there in their head. And I've seen where it can take people shame, depression, misplaced guilt, a lot of different areas that are really dark and recessive.
We have something going on in the States. You're American living in Canada. There's people who get down this rabbit hole of believing things that aren't true. Is that a form of addiction as well? Being addicted to bad information?
Oh, yes. Yes, well, there are delusions for sure that come with addiction, whether that's thinking too highly of me or thinking too low of me, or actually having these thoughts about someone or something that actually isn't in reality. So I think something that's true that's not true, or I think of something that's not true that actually is true. And so, yeah, delusion can be a big piece when it comes to addiction. But of course, we could go into the realm of schizophrenia, which kind of goes into delusions of persecution or delusions of grandeur, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I
Mhm.
understand that you can bring about schizophrenia if you keep taking enough drugs and then you get paranoid. You could actually bring about that kind of disease. Am I right to assume that it's possible?
Yep, that type can be substance induced if someone takes enough. Um, yeah.
Hmm. How much success do you see in your practice?
With addiction, it depends on a lot of different factors when I'm working with somebody. Their phase of change that they're in is a big part. If I'm working with someone where maybe their family member brings them in, they're very pre-contemplative or they're only contemplative, like maybe they think there's a problem, but they don't want to do anything about it. There's only so much I can do, John,
Mm, yeah.
and
Yeah.
I just meet the person where they're at and I try to do some motivational interviewing questions such as, these behaviors, do they line up with your values that you have or that you've had in the past? And those type of questions. I have seen some successes, some amazing successes. Sometimes people don't get, if they want to look at abstinence as a goal, sometimes it takes more than one try to throw out that fishing line into the water and reel back in abstinence.
Yeah.
And I've seen people persevere and go to treatment at least twice, and now they're over 2 years sober, maybe
Hmm.
even more than that. So I've had some success. I've had sometimes when people they continue to struggle. I don't want to put it on a it's all about I can only do so much. I don't want to put it where
Yeah.
there's a percentage. It's tough to give a percentage for how much people
Yeah,
have success with it.
for sure, of course.
Yeah.
Well, there's various anonymous groups. The most famous one would be AA, but there's Al-Anon, there's Narcotics Anonymous. There's one for gambling, I'm sure.
Yes.
And Al-Anon makes me, we know what that's for, but sometimes that could be a reflection of what you said earlier, toxic relationships.
Hmm.
So how do you view those organizations? Are they working in tandem with you, or are they doing something very different than what you're doing?
They work in tandem. They definitely work in tandem. They don't contradict anything that I would talk with someone about in treatment. I've
Hmm.
actually been to a few open AA meetings and
Hmm.
I've been to a few Al-Anon meetings in the community here. It's been really good. I mean, I went through a treatment myself for a week at this inpatient treatment facility, and the treatment was primarily for family members of those in active addiction or in recovery. And they told me, Eric, you work with people, you need to be going to Al-Anon. It's like, okay. So I've been to a few. I don't go regularly now. I don't go religiously.
Hmm.
And I think that it's really good because I talk about the importance of social support, the importance of community, being in a place where I can safely tell them myself. And those are some awesome communities that can give that to somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. Ever come across anybody who accidentally became addicted? And I will tell you my story. I had my nose repaired back in my 30s, and it was painful. And so the doctor prescribed Tylenol threes. And boy, that really got rid of the pain. And here in Canada, you can buy Tylenol ones over the counter. All you got to do is ask for it. Now, maybe that law's changed, but back when I was in my 30s, you just go to the pharmacist and ask for Tylenol ones. And if you take three of them, I figured they're like Tylenol threes. And anytime I had a headache, I popped one of those. And for about a year, I did that, and I became addicted to it. And boy, was it surprising. But because I realized, and I talked to my doctor about it, he says, you're addicted. I stopped. Now I had headaches like crazy for about a month. I guess the not taking the pills, but I didn't want to do that. You ever come across people like that who got accidentally addicted to something and now they're just stuck?
Yeah. I have worked with people, yeah, primarily with opiates where they've started, yeah, using and then they've unfortunately become dependent. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't even realize it. Yeah, it wasn't for fun, that's for sure.
Definitely not for kicks.
No. So you say you're working on another book.
I am. I
Okay,
am. Yeah.
let's talk about that.
Yeah, this is my first time actually talking about it
Mhm.
publicly. So there is a portion in the book that's been released that speaks about an accident that my dad had when he was hunting for Native American artifacts known as arrowheads in Tennessee back in February of 2000. So he was accidentally buried alive during this incident. Thankfully, he had two people with him that very much rescued him from dying. And so it's talked about a little bit in this social piece, the social chapter in the book, the importance of social interaction, social support. And so in this book that's coming out, which is significantly smaller, by the way, from the book I just released, like more than halfway smaller, it's all about these interviews that I did back in 2005 with the three men. I transcribed those interviews, and I also got an interview from my mom and dad just in the last few weeks. Kind of got 24 years later. What are your thoughts and feelings, experiences now, like all these years later, about that incident? And so I was able to go back to this documentary, which took some time because I'm listening and I'm typing and I'm trying to, do this word for word and getting all three perspectives, which is really interesting when I actually wrote it out because, yeah, there are some slight nuances that are different. And so it is a part true story, part self-help book. So the name of the book is Buried Alive, and the subtitle would be like Four Ways to Free Yourself from the Dirt. And of course, well, not of course, but dirt being more like we talked about earlier, John, like self-defeating thoughts and
Mhm.
beating myself up. And so I go into four different parts that correspond to what they went through with an incident and bring it into the self-help realm with some different applications to
Mhm.
help folks out that I've really seen important for myself as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a wholly different approach altogether. It's not like martial art of recovery too, right? It's a completely different thing, but still has self-help attachments to it. Excellent.
Hmm.
I'm reminded of something that I've done over the last few years where I went from nonfiction to writing fiction. I got sort of tired of hearing my own voice saying what I think it should be. And I just started writing a story. But I insist that if you read these fictional stories, they're intended to help you with whatever problems are ailing you. Have you ever considered fiction as a way of getting your messages across?
It's interesting you asked that. I like I mentioned before we started, I have a screenplay background and nothing's been produced. I've had some really close calls. One that was quite unfortunate where a film came out that was very similar to what we were producing. And then, yeah, the project got scrapped very quickly. But, learning experience.
Hmm.
I appreciated the process and the opportunity. That being said, there is some different scripts I've written which are very much nonfiction, or sorry, very much fictional, sci-fi, thriller, inspirational.
Yeah.
I guess the inspirational one is actually nonfiction because it is a boxer's true story. But anyway, yeah, so I've thought about all those screenplays that I've written, just there's the outline of a book and really just starting to flesh out those different stories that I've already written. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, then there's the fictional nonfiction we used to call it. It's probably called something else these days, but it's based on a historic thing, like perhaps, I don't know, the bombing of Dresden, but you're going to add
Mm.
a story in there of fictional characters and what they went through. So I speak to a lot of different authors, and I've heard people write like that too. I haven't written that way, but sounds very interesting. As long as we get a message across, and not everyone has a message, but it sounds of it you do. You really care about people. So I imagine that you'll want to explore that with further books. You got the bug now, right? You're writing books.
Yeah, I'm writing books. If you asked me that 3.5 years ago, I would have said there's no way I would be writing a book. I had to deal
Okay.
with a lot of self-doubt and constantly dealing with that as I was writing and before I published, and even after publishing. It's like, just, put that card of crap to the side,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how was it for you? You decided you're going to write a book. What was the first step you took?
First step was really just saying, does this make sense? Do I think that people are going to see this as making sense and applying to them? And can this actually relate to them, John? Can this actually connect with them on an emotional level? Even if they've had no experience with martial arts, my goal was to bring things where they don't have to like go out and get a gi and start going to a dojo. And thankfully, from feedback from people that I've been working with professionally that has taken it upon themselves, sure, to take the book and to read it. At least one of them does not have any experience, so for them to get a lot out of it, just even that one person, it's been worthwhile. So
Okay, great.
yeah, yeah,
You mentioned 3.5 years ago. Is that when you started thinking about writing the book?
yeah. It's probably around that time, about 3.5 years ago, and then starting writing it about 3 years ago or so.
Hmm.
So doing about 6, 7 months or however long that was of, do I want to start? A lot of contemplative
Yeah,
thinking, and then
yeah.
starting to do the preparation part of it.
Hmm. I started the show 3 years ago, and
Oh,
I've talked to so many people who started writing during the pandemic because they're all, self-isolating and
mhm.
something they wanted to do. So finally, now this chance to do it. Were you one of those people?
I must have been. I never thought about it, but
Well, your
unconsciously,
practice must have been disrupted to some degree, right?
yeah, it was. So during that time, I've been in the private practice for a little over 2 years, and I was working at this private inpatient treatment facility for addiction. And for certain reasons, I had to leave that facility,
Hmm.
personal and political reasons. And then I was actually I was starting to build the practice full
Hmm.
time, full time,
Right.
and also working as an associate at another clinic. So yeah, you know what? It might have just been able to free up my time, absolutely, where I could think about sitting down and writing because I wasn't doing that 9 to 5 job, not
Yeah.
including the commutes back and forth.
Hmm. Do you ever do Zoom meetings with your patients or or is always inpatient? How does that work?
Yeah, I'm doing primarily outpatient now, and I'm doing a lot of in person on like Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays, and today and tomorrow I'll be doing mostly Zoom meetings.
Hmm.
I am going actually out to a place called Bragg Creek today because I work for a outfit that does retreat center therapy like packages for people, and part
Hmm.
of that is me coming out.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that today in person, but that's not like every week. So
Okay.
it kind of gives me some variety. Yeah.
Well, in the last 10, 20 years, we've been hearing a lot about mental health and how we need to improve it. Do you see, well, how long have you been aware of the need for mental health? You're certainly, not my age. I went through the 80s and 90s. 90s were crazy. I mean, they were prescribing antidepressants to anybody. Everybody was just over prescription, and everybody agrees that. But when it was happening, I was saying, I don't think this is healthy. What do you think of all that?
I do believe that there are certain medications that are overprescribed, and I think that people can start to rely on them too much. When I start to begin to believe that mental health was a concern was definitely when I started to do my bachelor's, and very much so when I started to do my master's because I was doing my practicum, which I was doing actual therapy with folks supervised. And okay, yeah, there's a lot behind the Facebook and social media veil of pretty faces that
Mhm.
people are going through. So yeah, there is, I think when it comes to, like you mentioned, antidepressants for sure, and people trying to get off antidepressants after a number of years, it can be difficult.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
You mentioned social media. Had people suggest, and I'm in somewhat agreement to it, that technology has advanced quicker than the human psyche. And so now we're living in a meme world, and people who really haven't thought about this long enough and hard enough are just jumping on the bandwagon of just pointing their finger and calling everybody names and just being mean-spirited. And I think that's very unhealthy for society. What's your take on that?
Yeah, John, I've seen where
Yeah.
people are getting so much affirmation in such a quick amount of time with people putting their likes or
Mm,
comments like, oh, that's so great. And which, there's nothing wrong with getting affirmation, but I feel like it needs to be a byproduct and not like the expectation that we need. And
mhm.
when young people, they get that one comment that's either neutral or negative,
Hmm.
and then they start to perseverate on that. So
Mhm.
I even work with, just working with young people. Let's just say someone that's maybe had an assault on them, and then yeah, they might have people posting about that to people online about them, and so I feel like I feel like it does more harm than good,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to the younger generations like Gen Z and even millennials if they're I mean, that can be part of it too. I think, just working with people, it's not always that Facebook profile picture that
Yeah.
is the whole story, and it just gives this illusion that everything's great. And people that are having a hard time, they see all these Facebook pictures and posts and all this. Oh, this person's doing so much better than me. I'm such a disgrace. I'm such a failure. Well, actually, in reality, maybe not so much different because
Yeah,
we're all going through our journeys and we're all going through our struggles.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those kind of feelings can sometimes lead to alcoholism or drug
Very much.
addiction,
Oh yeah,
recreational
absolutely.
drugs and whatnot. Sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I come from a rock and roll background. Those 6 years that I spent on the road, I mean, people were doing drugs and drinking all the time. So yeah, it's just part of that
it's a
culture.
lot. It's a lifestyle, eh?
It is,
Yeah,
unfortunately. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And
So
yeah.
you go on. You were saying something?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna seeing people like Alice Cooper be able to even come out of that. It's just those amazing testimonies too. You
Cool.
know,
I know.
you know.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
always been there, though. His father was a pastor, and he never stopped
Mm,
believing in God. I used to think he always called himself a Christian, and yet,
mm.
he did what he did. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, but that's each his own.
Yeah,
When I was younger, I liked Alice Cooper, but then eventually I grew out of the need to watch that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Let's talk about your website. What we see? What do we see there?
RecoveryArtsCounselling.com. I have a blog. I got a resource page with different resources for different topics, bipolar disorder, relationships. I do have a media page for some of the podcasts that I've been on. So there's
Mhm.
like 12 or so different podcasts on there, and
Good.
a little about me, and just getting to know me a little bit better. There's a profile page.
Okay. Super. So you married a Canadian, you're an American. Does that mean that you can have dual citizenship if you wanted to?
It means I can, John, if I wanted to pursue it. Right now, I'm a permanent resident, and I've considered becoming a citizen. But yes, if I wanted to jump into that pool, I certainly could.
Yeah. I wasn't born in Canada, and I always wanted to be an American citizen. My father chose Canada to come to, and oh, geez, when I was a kid, we used to go down to the States and go, oh, I like it here so much better chocolate bars, I used to think.
Hershey's and all that, eh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
commercials. I used to watch American television shows and wished I was American.
Mm.
I'm not sure that I'd wish that today, but that doesn't really matter at this point, does it? I think we're all
No.
just one. We're just one big family.
Yeah, totally. Got some big brothers up top and some little brothers at the bottom, and
Yep.
yeah, it's kind of like cousins, actually, in a way, eh?
Yeah, sure.
Kind of like cousins, yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, if you want to give your elevator pitch, you gave one at the beginning. You want to give one at the end? I'll put you full frame, and you can tell people. just briefly what your book's about and where to buy it and why they should buy it?
The book is called, The Martial Art of Recovery, Self-Mastery Practices for Subduing Addiction and Achieving Mental Wellness. It's all about the intersection of martial arts concepts with addiction recovery and mental health treatment. If you're looking for a different, creative, metaphorical, innovative approach to dealing with addiction and mental health concerns, pick it up. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Apple iBooks, those different places. And so if you're looking for some support, that could be a supplement for your healing journey.
Well, that sounds great. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Eric.
You too.
And
Yeah.
when you write your second book, you look me up and we'll have you back on and we can talk about that one.
You as well, John. It sounds like a plan. Thank you.
Take care now. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, and if you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then I invite you to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment if you wish. And if you are an author, I would sure love to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing, and remember to be kind to one another.